Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be back with you. I hope you're glad to be here. If it's your first time that you've ever been here, please consider subscribing to my channel. I do at least 2 stories a day, and then I do other things, whether it's slideshows of nature or dealing with cooking, gardening, homesteading in general. So, always looking for new subscribers. If you do subscribe, after you do, a bell will pop up. Make sure and poke that and you'll get notified each time that I load something up. So we're going to continue reading in our book, On the Banks of Plum Creek by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yesterday was a very interesting one to me about the grasshoppers, which I suspect were really locusts, and how they went marching west. And they're out of the area, but they've done terrible damage. So let's see what happens today. Today's chapter's title is Wheels of Fire. All the days were peaceful after that July day when the grasshoppers flew away. Remember, they marched and marched, and then all of a sudden they just all flew away. Rain fell and grass grew again over all the land that they'd eaten bare and left brown and ugly. Ragweeds grew faster, and careless weeds, and the big spreading tumbleweeds like bushes. Willows and cottonwoods and plum thickets put out their leaves again. There would be no fruit, for blossom time had already passed. There would be no wheat. But wild hay was growing coarse in the low places by the creek. Potatoes lived, and there were fish in the fish trap. Do you remember that fish trap? Oh, I told you I thought that would be an interesting way to fish. Pa hitched Sam and David to Mr. Nelson's plow and plowed part of the weedy wheat field. He plowed a wide fire break west of the house from the creek to the creek again. On the field, he sowed turnip seeds. "It's late," he said. "The old folks say to sow turnips the 25th of July, wet or dry. But I guess the old folks didn't figure on grasshoppers. And likely there will be as many turnips as you and the girls can handle, Carolyn. I won't be here to do it." He must go away to the east again to work where there were harvests, for the house was not yet paid for, and he must buy salt and cornmeal and sugar. He could not stay and cut the hay that Sam and David and Spot must have to eat next winter, but Mr. Nelson agreed to cut and stack Pa's wild hay for a share of it. Then, one morning early, Pa went walking away. He went whistling out of sight with his jumper roll on his shoulder. But there was not one hole in his boots this time. He would not mind the walk, and someday he would come walking back again. In the mornings, after chores and the housework was done, Laura and Mary studied their books. In the afternoon, Ma heard their lessons. Then they might play or sew their seams till time to meet the herd and bring Spot and her calf home. Then came chores again, and supper dishes, and bedtime. After Mr. Nelson stacked Pa's hay by the stable, the days were warm on the sunny side of the stacks, but their shady sides were cool. The wind blew chill, and the mornings were frosty. One morning, when Laura drove Spot and her calf to meet the herd, Johnny was having trouble with the cattle. He was trying to drive them out on the prairie to the west, where the frostbitten brown grass was tall. The cattle did not want to go. They kept turning and dodging back. Jack and Laura helped him drive them. The sun was coming up then, and the sky was clear. But before Laura got back home, she saw a low cloud in the west. She wrinkled her nose and sniffed long and deep, and she remembered Indian territory. "Ma!" she cried. Ma came outdoors and looked at the cloud. "It's far away, Laura," Ma said. "Likely it won't come so far." All morning, the wind blew out of the west. At noon, it was blowing more strongly, and Ma and Mary and Laura stood in the doorway and watched the dark cloud coming nearer. "I wonder where the herd is," Ma worried. At last, they could see a flickering brightness under the cloud. Now, what do you think that flickering brightness would be? I've got an idea. "If the cows are safe across the creek, we needn't worry," said Ma. "Fire can't cross that fire break. Better come in the house, girls, and eat your dinner." Yeah. Did you think lightning? That's what I thought too. And when lightning strikes, here where I live in the woods, it starts forest fires. But they lived on the prairie, and it would start grass fires there. She took Carrie into the house, but Laura and Mary looked just once more at the smoke rolling nearer. Then Mary pointed and opened her mouth, but she could not speak. Laura screamed, "Ma! Ma! A wheel of fire!" In front of the red flickering smoke, a wheel of fire was rolling swiftly, setting fire to the grass as it went. Another and another and another came rolling fast before the wind. The first one was whirling across the fire break. With the water pail and mop, Ma ran out to meet it. She struck it with the wet mop and beat it out black onto the ground. She ran to the next one, but more and more were still coming. "Stay back, Laura," she said. Laura stayed back flat against the house, holding Mary's hand tight and watching. In the house, Carrie was crying because Ma had shut her in. The wheels of fire came on faster and faster. They were the big tumbleweeds that had ripened round and dry and pulled up their small roots so the wind could blow them far and scatter their seeds. Now they were burning, but still they rolled before the roaring wind and the roaring big fire that followed them. Smoke swirled around now where Ma was and where she ran, beating with her mop at those fierce, fiery wheels. Jack shivered against Laura's legs, and tears ran out of her smarting eyes. Smoke makes your eyes sting. Mr. Nelson's gray colt came galloping, and Mr. Nelson jumped off it at the stable. He grabbed a pitchfork and shouted, "Run quick, bring wet rags." He went running to help Ma. Laura and Mary ran to the creek with the gunny sacks. They ran back with them sopping wet, and Mr. Nelson put one on the pitchfork tines. Now, pitchforks, I don't know if you've seen them. They're kind of like a shovel. They have a long handle, but at the end they have, at least 3, usually 4 long tines, so you can poke something and lift things up. That's what a pitchfork is. Ma's pail was empty. They ran back and they filled it full of more water. The wheels of fire were running up the knoll. Streaks of fire followed through the dry grass. Ma and Mr. Nelson fought them with the mop and wet sacks. I'm going to show you what it turned out looking like when they were fighting that fire. See the smoke and the sacks and the running with more things? Ma and Mr. Nelson fought them, with the mop and wet sacks. The haystacks, Laura screamed. One wheel of fire had got to the haystacks. Mr. Nelson and Ma went running through the smoke. Another wheel came rolling over the black-burned ground to the house. Laura was so frightened she did not know what she was doing. Carrie was in the house. Laura beat that burning wheel to death with her wet gunny sack. Then there were no more wheels. Ma and Mr. Nelson had stopped the fire at the haystacks. Bits of sooty hay and grass swirled in the air, but the big fire rushed to the firebreak. It could not get across. Now, I want to just explain in case you didn't understand what a firebreak was. They would plow a section of ground. Nowadays we use bulldozers usually, and it would be just dirt. Fire has to have something to burn. It needs air, which, is here all the time, but it needs fuel to burn. Otherwise, there's nothing to keep it going and it will go out. So if you have a fire break, that's so that there's nothing for that fire to burn. It ran fast to the south to the creek. It ran north and came to the creek there too. It could not go any farther, so it dwindled down and died where it was. The cloud of smoke was blowing away and the prairie fire was out. Mr. Nelson said he had gone on his gray colt after the cattle. They were safe on the other side of the creek. "We are grateful to you, Mr. Nelson," Ma said. "You saved our place. The girls and I could have never done it alone." Then, when he had gone away, she said, "There is nothing in the world so good as a good neighbor. Come now, girls, wash. It's time to eat your dinner." Wow, they had fought so hard, and I'm glad they were able to save their place. And I'm glad they had a good neighbor. I have good neighbors, and I'm so thankful for them. Whether we've had emergencies or I wanted horse manure to put in my compost bins for my garden, I've been able to get that. If I needed somebody to talk to or just wanted a friend, I have neighbors, and I appreciate that. And I try to be neighborly too. So I try to be there if they need me, if something has happened. And if I have something to share, I like to share. What do you do to be a good neighbor? Well, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I hope you enjoyed this chapter, Wheels of Fire. I don't know how brave I would have been in that situation, but sometimes you just got to do what you have to do. And that's like what Laura did. All right. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming. Good night. God bless.